Hey guys, Professor Mullen here. First of all, I want to wish you a very happy Thanksgiving. I know it was yesterday, class is tomorrow. It's actually Thanksgiving today. I'm recording this. Class is tomorrow, Friday. So we're not going to have live in-person class. So this is your recorded Module 5 lecture and would substitute in as your regular class. Watch it at your leisure, but make sure that well, obviously, if you're hearing me, you're watching it. But happy Thanksgiving to you and to your families. I hope you are getting ready to start the holiday season. It is week 5 of 8. So congratulations to all of you. You have made it more than halfway through this politics class that you thought, well, why do I have to take this class? I don't want to take this class. And we talked about that, and I get it, but you're more than halfway through and you're all doing great. So I hope that you are learning a few things and beginning to think a little bit more about how politics works in your everyday life. So just like we do with live class, we're going to start with a little review of sort of what's happened in politics and also talk about what's coming down the pike, because as I've been saying to you in previous classes, weeks 6 and 7 are big money modules where there's a lot of points available to you. At this point in the module, every point counts. Every point matters, right? So I have a few of you out there who are starting to eat a few zeros. And I don't like to see that because you need a 70 to pass this class, to get a C, or better, okay? You need to pass this class or you will have to take it again. And who wants to do that? Nobody wants to do that, right? So I need you to really focus on not swallowing up those zeros on these assignments. You've got to stay current on getting them in. When you get them in late or you don't follow the instructions, some of you for the PowerPoints, 10 slides of content, plus 1 slide for the cover, 1 slide for your references, a total of 12 slides, right? Lots of you only gave me 10 slides, and so you lost points for that, right? Unnecessary points. I don't want to see you losing those points. I want to see you getting those points, right? Let's use spell check. Okay, because you're going to lose points for that too. I do know that you have other classes. I do know that you have other things, jobs, families. I get it. Okay. But I really need you to focus on trying to get through weeks 5, 6, 7, and 8. So here we go with what's coming down the pike. Let me see if I can find the modules that are coming at you so that we can look at them together and talk about how you get the most out of every one of these points. Okay, so for module 5, which is this week, we talked about it in class last week. Okay, but let's talk about it again. We're going to look at the presentation that you have to do. Let me just get it up on my screen here, and then I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you so that we can go through it together. All right, so here you go for the module 5 presentation, right? Here's what's going to be required of you. You've got to go ahead and do a PowerPoint presentation again. Okay, so let's make sure that we focus this time. 10 slides of content. That means a total of 12 slides, 1 cover, 10 slides of content, 1 slide with your references in APA format on a separate slide. Okay, what you're going to study is the role of different forces on the pricing of pharmaceuticals. So you're going to take a look at and compare and contrast the cost of prescription drugs in the United States with the cost of the same prescription drugs in Europe or other countries, anywhere. Okay, so you're going to, in your 10 slides, why are the prices in the United States higher? What is the role of big pharma in the pricing of drugs? What reforms have been made or are being made to make prescriptions more available? And what more needs to be done? Okay, now I want to focus you right here. You can add a voiceover to your PowerPoint slides. When you go into the PowerPoint program, there is an insert button. When you click it, it'll say insert audio, and that'll allow you to narrate over your slides. Okay, so you can go ahead and tell the story that you are trying to tell. Give the lesson as though you were teaching a class using your 10 slides. And you use the voiceover to narrate the same way that I'm speaking to you in class, right? Or you may do notes, the same sort of idea that we did last time. But if you do notes, remember what I told you, okay? I can't see the notes section if you put them in your PowerPoint presentation and put your PowerPoint presentation into the portal. I can't see your notes. So make notes on a separate document. Slide 1, underneath that, whatever the notes are that you would be speaking about for that slide. Your notes, your voiceover, are not just you reading the slide. They are the lecture that would go along with whatever you've put on your slides, okay? They are the teaching points. They are different than what your slides say. So it's not just a matter of you reading your slides or copying what you have on your slide to a note and attaching it in the comments in the portal so I can read it. It's a matter of you developing an actual presentation where you teach somebody from your slides, okay? So 10 slides of content, 12 total is the minimum, with notes or voiceover where you insert audio so I can listen to you giving the lecture, okay? This module 5 presentation is worth, I think, 50 points, if I'm not correct. Let's look down here. A total of 50 points, okay? Now, that's module 5. That's this week. That's due by Sunday. Today's Thursday, Thanksgiving, okay? So hopefully you are already working away on that, and you will let me know if you need any help. But what I really want to start looking at is module 6, which is worth 70 points and is open now if you want to start working on it, because it's starting to be that time of the module where your life and your other classes and the holidays and everything is just going to crush in on you. So the sooner you get ahead of these big money modules, the better off you'll be. Okay, so module 6 coming down the pike. Here it is. 800 words or more. Got to pay attention to that minimum word count. Okay, you are going to write a paper comparing our country's healthcare system, the way we deliver healthcare in the United States, to a different country that you choose. Okay, and the way they deliver healthcare in their country. So I've had people write to me about Norway, about Sweden, about Australia, about Canada, about China, about Thailand. Very interesting comparisons between how we deliver healthcare and the health of our people generally under our system and the way other countries do it. Okay, 800 words. What you're going to do is talk about what each system is. What is our system and what is the system of the country you have chosen for comparison? How are they the same? How are they different? How much does each country spend on healthcare services for their citizens? What are the outcomes for our country and for other countries? And in order to assess how it's what the outcome is how's it working, right? You're going to look at life expectancy rates, mortality rates, procedure costs, infant mortality rates. All these things are ways for you to discuss how effective our system is versus the system of the country that you've chosen to compare our system to. Any country, as long as you identify it and focus on it. US versus whatever country you've chosen. Okay, and you're going to write this paper, 800 word minimum, spell check, please. You're going to APA format your references, okay? 2 scholarly sources minimum. This is due a week from Sunday. So today's Thursday, the 23rd of November. This is due a week. So Sunday will be 24, 25, 26 of November. This is due a week later. In order for you to get full credit, and but guys, I'm telling you, every point counts, okay? So submitting your paper late is only minus 10%. It's better than nothing, but 10% of 70 is you're gonna lose 7 points right off the top just because it's late, okay? It's open for you now. You can start working on it now. Don't lose 10%, just, because you don't have time, okay? So let's try to get every point we can. Now, also open for you now, coming down the pike, Module 7, which builds off of Module 6. So the more time you spend on Module 6, the easier Module 7 is, right? Module 7 is worth 100 points. 100 points. So if you're on the cusp of a C, you're B or a C, and you really want to get a B, getting all 100 points is really how you can push your grade over the top. If you're between a B and an A and you really want to push that grade point average up, this is the way you do it. Get all 100 points here. I want to give them to you. How do you get all 100 points? Well, Module 6 is compare what we do in terms of delivering healthcare to what the country that you've chosen to compare to does, and tell us how it all works out. Module 7 is go ahead and take a position. You are for it or you are against it about how we deliver healthcare in this country, okay? What is your opinion about what we do to deliver healthcare? Is it working? Isn't it working? Why not? And what do you think should happen to make it better, okay? In order for you to complete Module 7 and get all the points, there is a 1,200 word minimum. It's a different assignment than Module 6, so you're not just going to be able to copy and paste. But the more you learn about the way we deliver healthcare for the Module 6 project, the easier it is for you to take a position on whether what we're doing is working or not, good or bad, in Module 7. Okay, so you are going to go ahead and write a 1,200-page paper about how we deliver healthcare and whether it's working or not in your opinion. Take a position, which means I like it or I don't like it. I agree or I disagree, and why. Okay, take a position on how we should deliver healthcare. Use data from other countries, like, for example, the country you chose to compare to in Module 6. Maybe some of the data from what your classmates put into their comparisons, right? You're going to compare the cost to individuals, how much the government spends to insure individuals and make sure they have health care, right? Prescription drug costs, which is what Module 5's assignment is. So are you tracking? 5 builds into 6, which 5 and 6 together build into 7, which is worth the biggest amount of points for the entire module, okay? You're going to talk about the pros and cons, and you're going to go ahead and you're going to write yourself 1,200 words, and you're going to submit them in the portal timely so that you get every chance to have all 100 points. We're going to talk about it again every week between now and when it's due, but I just wanted to start you out thinking about it because these assignments are worth a lot of points, and at this point, every point counts. Okay, so modules 5, 6, and 7 coming down the pike. Once you clear those out of the way, we're towards the very end. Module 8 is easy. We're going to have no trouble with Module 8. But 5, 6, and 7, I need you to concentrate. And I need you to work ahead if you can. Because as the end of this module comes along, so does the end of the year, so does Christmas, so do all your other finals, so does everything. So we're going to try to snap, crackle, and pop and get it all in there in time, so that you can finish strong in this American politics class, all right? I want you to make sure that you focus on trying to make sure you get every point. Okay, what happened this week in politics? Well, a lot happened, but as a woman in the world, I think it's important for us to pause for a moment to mention something important that happened in politics from the perspective of women, right? And that is the death of former First Lady Rosalind Carter, right? Jimmy Carter's wife, Rosalind Carter, 96 years old. She died earlier this week. And you may not have any memory of who the Carters were or what their presidency was like. Jimmy Carter was a Democrat from Georgia, a peanut farmer, owned a peanut farm, just a regular guy, and really sort of a testament to the idea that in this country, anyone can become the president, right? Jimmy Carter was not a wealthy man. Jimmy Carter was not, a career aspiring politician. He was just a regular citizen who wanted to run to be the president of the United States, and he won. Okay, now the story is more complicated than that, but just take me at my word that Jimmy Carter was one of the most unassuming sort of regular guy presidents we ever had. And for that reason and others, he was a one-term president, which means he served 4 years. You know that your congresspeople get elected every 2 years, your senators get elected every 6 years, and the president gets elected every 4 years and can serve 2 back-to-back 4-year terms if he can get elected. And I say he because we haven't had a female president yet, but I'm hopeful. So Jimmy Carter served 4 years before he was not reelected. But he and his wife sort of made history in the way that his presidency was run. The Carters' love story, Rosalind and Jimmy Carter's love story, is one for the ages, right? And everyone who has known them has said that their love for each other, their partnership was strong. And when Jimmy Carter was the president of the United States, Rosalind Carter was often in cabinet meetings, on important phone calls with world leaders, and participating at the highest levels of government in a way that was unprecedented for first ladies to participate in the work of their husbands, right? The president. Rosalind Carter was sometimes referred to by White House staffers as the co-executive, right? Meaning she and Jimmy Carter were the president together, right? And that was unheard of in those days. Rosalind Carter understood pretty quickly, and even she was just like a country girl from Georgia, right? But super smart lady, and she knew pretty quickly that the office of the First Lady, while it has no official position in government, right? She doesn't have any power in the government, but the office of the First Lady, and now the second gentleman, right? Kamala Harris's Vice President Kamala Harris's husband is now known as the second gentleman, right? But the office of the First Lady was traditionally sort of a ceremonial role. The wife of the president entertained the wives of foreign leaders when they came to meet with the men presidents. The wives would be, the First Lady's job was to have tea and host them and show them the garden and select the china and all that kind of thing. But Rosalind Carter was different. She and Jimmy Carter's partnership meant that she was a part of many of the decisions of the Carter presidency. And so in her passing, we lose a sort of trailblazing woman politician. I don't know that she would have called herself a politician, but she was. And she wielded power in her husband's presidency in a way that was unheard of, but replicated moving forward. So Nancy Reagan, also Michelle Obama, first ladies who have really taken the office of the First Lady as a political, powerful position rather than just a sort of showpiece for the executive, right? And so do yourselves a favor and stop and read a little bit about who Rosalind Carter was and the way that she changed the face of the presidency and the office of the First Lady, right? So that's something that happened in politics this week, right? Also happening in politics are some bipartisan agreements related to the passing of the budget. So the federal government was supposed to shut down because of budget disagreement, and the senators got together and passed an agreement to extend the funding of the federal government until February. And that's good, because that means all of the goods and services that we rely on from the federal government coffers, the money that funds the federal government, will be in full play. And hopefully they can reach an agreement in February about signing on to a full year's worth of budget. So that's your quick review of what happened this week in politics. I'm sure that you know of more things, and I look forward to hearing more from you about what happened in politics over this holiday week, when we are back again in session live class a week from tomorrow. So that will be November 30th, Friday, November 30th, we will be back for our next live class, module 6. Okay. Now, before we move on to the content of this week's class, I want to begin to speak to you about module 6. Module 6 is what we call add drop week, right? Add drop week is if you are not going to pass this class with a C or better, if that's the situation, right? You have to drop this class by module 6, by week 6, because if you don't, you can't get out of it without taking the grade with you. So if you're going to fail the class, you're going to take the F onto your transcript, and an F onto your transcript weights down your entire overall grade point average. And you know you need a specific minimum grade point average in order to qualify to get into the core nursing program, which is the whole reason why you're at Arizona College of Nursing, right? So you can get in the core nursing program. So if you are not going to pass this class mathematically, if there are not enough assignment points left for you to get a 70 or better, and you're in danger of failing, you've really got to sit down with your success coach and the people you know and love and yourself and decide, because I don't want to see you take the F onto your transcript. Okay. If you have questions or concerns about whether or not you're in that boat, reach out to me. I want to make sure that by module 6, and we're only in 5, next week is 6. By module 6, everybody understands where you're at in the world and whether or not you're mathematically able to pass this class. If you are, then I want you to stay and work hard, and I'll work with you, and we'll do everything we can to try to get you up and over. But if it's mathematically not possible, math works, my friends. So I have a lot of power, but I can't make 2 and 2 equal 6. Okay, so 2 and 2 will always equal 4. So if you're not going to mathematically be able to pass the class, you're going to have to consider dropping it. All right, so you don't carry the F onto your transcript. All right, we'll talk more about that when I see you live. Okay, this week's module is about Congress and the judiciary, right? And there are a couple of important concepts for you to take away from the module on Congress and the judiciary. And of course, there will be a video attached in a separate link for you to watch in addition to listening to this lecture. But the important things about Congress and the judiciary are this. We've learned about the executive branch of government, right? And the Congress, which consists of the House of Representatives and the Senate together equal the Congress, right? The Congress and the executive branch, the president, are equal in power. Many people believe that our government is like this, and the president sits up here, you know, and is the all-knowing, all-doing being, the most powerful person in the government. Wrong. Okay. Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, together equal Congress, plus the president, they have the same power. They are co-equal branches of government. And we've talked about why that is, right? You remember from our earlier modules about how when we became a country, the thing that the founding fathers were so scared of, and the states, the original colonies, the thing that they were so against signing on to, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, they were very worried about the formation of the United States of America, because what they didn't want was what they had just gotten rid of, which was an all-powerful king, right? Somebody who at the very top was telling them what to do, and they didn't want that. So that's why when the fight for independence was over and we were trying to form our own government, there was disagreement, right, between the Federalists and people who wanted the government to look one way and people who wanted the government to look another way, and people who didn't want to agree to be part of a united anything, because they said, what's in it for me? I'm a state. I run my own thing. What do I need, an overlord for? I just got rid of my overlord, the King of England, and now I don't want another overlord. So I'm not interested in becoming a part of the united anything until the Bill of Rights, right? So people were having trouble, the founding fathers were having trouble getting people in the colonies to sign on to agree to be part of the United States of America, because the people in the states were saying, in the colonies were saying, what's in it for me? How I don't live like, I'm in Maine. I don't live like the people in North Carolina. We don't grow crops here. We don't need slaves. We don't think slavery's right. And what do you know about how we live up here anyway? This is New England. You don't know anything about life up here. We live off the sea. And down there in North Carolina and South Carolina and Virginia, you live off the land. So why would I agree? How am I going to protect myself from some big government trying to come in here and take all our stuff? And the founding fathers had to go back to the drawing board and draw up the Bill of Rights. Individual protections against the big power of a big overseeing government, the federal government and the state government. What we learned in Module 1 is known as federalism, right? Once the folks in the colonies got some individual protections, the freedom of speech, the right to carry a gun, the right to worship as you wish, the right to be safe in your homes from intrusion by the government without probable cause or a warrant. These are the First, Second, Fourth Amendments, right? And later the rights to vote and all the other rights that you've studied and we've been talking about. Once they got those rights, then they agreed, okay, we need a federal government because what we need is a way to protect our new country from other foreign countries that would like to now take us over. And we need a centralized way to pay for an army, taxes, right? We need a centralized government that has the focus of protecting all of the colonies, no matter the different way of life in each of them. So we have a system of federalism where we have an over government from the federal government level, and then we have state government in each state. And depending on what state you live in, your laws may be different than the state next door, the state above you, the state below you. And if you don't like the laws in your state, you can go ahead and move to a state where they have laws that are more in line with the way you want to live your life, right? And then in the Constitution, there is a supremacy clause, which means that the federal law is the supreme law of the land, no matter what the state says. So when the federal government, for example, some of you wrote to me about the Supreme Court case Brown versus Board of Education, which was the Supreme Court case that made the law of the land that segregation in schools or anywhere is not equal and therefore is not permitted. So if it is a school, federally funded school, or a federal workplace, separate is not equal. It is unconstitutional to keep the races apart and claim that they are equal. So when the law of the land was in Brown versus Board of Education declared separate but equal is unconstitutional, it doesn't matter that in a certain state they may still want to keep people segregated. The supremacy clause of the Constitution means that the supreme law of the land is the federal rule. And you can never give people in a state less than what the federal government says they must have. In Brown versus Board of Education, for example, the federal government said you must desegregate in order to follow the Constitution. So even in states where they said, we don't want to desegregate, we'd like to keep the races separate, the federal government law of the land was, you may not. So even though we recognize federalism, the ability of a state to give people more rights than the federal government gives them, we do not recognize under federalism the ability of a state to give people less rights than the federal government says. Okay, so just remember, federalism, sure. Maybe your state makes marijuana sale for recreational use legal. Your state says you may have the right to recreationally buy and use marijuana. The federal government says, no, okay, we don't think that we're going to allow that for federal workers, but if your state wants to do that, you can go ahead and do it. You can move to a different state, the one next door, and they might say, nope, you cannot buy and use recreational marijuana. So federalism is tricky, but just remember that the federal law of the land is what controls what happens in a state. The federal government says segregation is unconstitutional. No state can make a law that says, well, here we're going to keep segregation. Can't do that. Okay. Once something violates the Constitution and it is declared to be unconstitutional, then no state may make a law that permits something that is unconstitutional. It's just not allowed. Okay. So when you think about the Congress and the president being equal, they are equal branches of government. The third branch is the court system. So how does the court system weigh in on or balance the three branches of government, right? The president, Congress, and the court. How do they work together? You understand how Congress and the president work. Congress is the money. The president has a good idea, like Joe Biden's student loan reform plan. Remember that earlier this year? The president made a plan to zero out student debt. And that plan got taken to the court system. People challenged it as unconstitutional. Why? Because it would cost the federal government a lot of money. And Congress controls the money. Congress has to agree to pay for the president's idea to zero out all the student loans. They didn't want to pay for it. They said that it was not the right use of the taxpayer money. Remember, their money comes from you and me. When you pay your taxes, that's the money that funds the federal government, right? So Congress, our elected representatives, some of them said, no, we don't think that that's the right expenditure of the taxpayers' money. So we're going to take this idea by the president to zero out student loans, and we're going to go to the court. And we're going to ask the court whether we have to pay for this or not. Is the president's idea constitutional? Does it violate any of the rules of the Constitution? And when they took it to the court said, it is not constitutional. You may not use the taxpayers' money under the plan that the Biden administration had submitted for the student loan reform. And they struck down the president's plan. Now he's back with a new plan, right? A different plan that his team thinks now fits the rules that the court invalidated the first plan under. So he's back with a new plan and they're trying it again. But that's an example in live time of how the three branches of government check and balance one another, right? So the court system is a very special sort of part of the balance of government. These are not elected officials. The judges of the United States Supreme Court are not elected. They are appointed. by the president, and their appointment lasts for life. So if you become, or I become, a Supreme Court justice, you die in that job. You don't ever have to leave. Okay. And once you're there, I don't know of a time that they've ever removed anybody. Now, right now, there's a lot going on at the Supreme Court in terms of the justices and their code of ethics or lack thereof. There's been a lot of press about how some of the judges have been accepting sort of excessive gifts and things from big time political millionaires who have cases pending before the court. That doesn't seem right. I mean, if you're paying for my luxury vacation, I might be a little more inclined to vote for your thing, right? So there's a lot going on in terms of a review of the ethics code. Right now, they don't have a code of ethics. They are trying to decide whether or not they need one, right? But it seems like they probably do. There's a lot going on with the Supreme Court. You can go ahead and Google that. Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito are the two judges who have been in the press lately about ethical problems that they may be having in terms of accepting gifts from donors. But generally speaking, the court system, the justices are there for life. They are supposed to be above the political fray, not subject to influence by politics or by gift giving or by anything like that. They're supposed to be, because they are appointed and they never have to run for re-election. That's the whole reason why they're appointed for life. So they never have to worry about running for re-election. So you don't have any conflicts when you're trying to think about how you're going to vote on a thing, right? So these are not, but they're not voted for by you and me. You and me vote for the president, who then will appoint the Supreme Court justice when the time comes. So in that way, you might think that, we have a say in it. But once they're there for life. And they are not supposed to be engaged in political jockeying for position in any way. And yet they maintain a very important power in our balance of government, which is judicial review, right? What does judicial review mean? Well, it's not a power granted by the Constitution, but it's the power of the court to go ahead and review and invalidate actions taken by Congress or by the president if the court believes that what Congress or the president is doing violates the Constitution. They can also invalidate state action, right? So judicial review is the power of the unelected judges, justices who sit at the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, to go ahead and review what the Congress does, what the president does, and what your states do, and to compare the action against the mandates of the Constitution and the documents that our country was founded on. And when they do that comparison, if they find that the action by the Congress or by the president or by your state violates any of the tenets of the Constitution, they can strike down the action. It's unconstitutional. Segregation of the schools, unconstitutional. Cannot do it, right? That was a state action. And the Supreme Court of the United States looked in on the state and said, what you're doing is unconstitutional. You can't do it. Okay. Joe Biden's student loan program, that was an action by the president. The Supreme Court looked in on it and said, you see what you're doing right there? Violates the Constitution. You can't do it. Okay. So that's the power of judicial review. That's how the third branch of government, the judicial branch, participates in the balance of power by the power of judicial review. Now, this is a recorded class, so you can't ask me this question. So I'll ask it for you. Hey, Professor Mullen, you just said that the power of judicial review is not a power that is granted by the United States Constitution. So if it's not granted by the United States Constitution, where does it come from? Where does the court's power to review decisions by the executive and by the legislative branch of government and by states and strike them down. Where does that come from? Right? Well, funnily enough, that you ask. It comes from the court itself, right? The court itself gave itself this power. What, you say? What? The court gave itself this very important power? Yes. In a case called Marbury versus Madison. Marbury versus Madison. Okay. Marbury and Madison, when you go to law school, I'm here to tell you, they make you spend a lot of time studying Marbury and Madison, right? Because it was the case where this whole power to review and strike down actions by the president, the Congress, and your states comes from. So what happened in Marbury versus Madison? Well, at the time, John Marshall was the Supreme Court justice who was responsible for this decision and is widely considered by many Supreme Court scholars to be one of the most formative and powerful Supreme Court justices the country had ever known, or to this day, right? So a guy who really had vision for how the Supreme Court of the United States should function in its role as part of the three axes of government: judicial, legislative, and executive, right? So what happened was that Marbury was a guy who, at the end of the presidency of John Adams, Marbury was a guy that Adams, as he was going out of office, said, "Hey, Marbury, man, like, I'd like to do you a solid. You've been good to me, so I'm going to make you the justice of the peace." So he assigned him the job of being the justice of the peace. So Marbury goes down to try to get his power, his commission, to take the job that the outgoing President Adams offered him, right? Now, it's important to note here in our little short story that Adams was a Federalist, right? The incoming president behind Adams was Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was a Democratic Republican, right? So those were the two parties at the time. So a guy of a different party, kind of like being a Republican and a Democrat now, right? So Thomas Jefferson was coming in behind Adams, and he was from a different party. So Marbury, President Adams is going out and he wants to do Marbury a solid, and he gives him this plum job. You can go ahead and become the justice of the peace, right? Well, he goes ahead and tries to get his commission from the then Secretary of State, James Madison. Hence the name of the case, Marbury versus James Madison, right? Madison was the Secretary of State under outgoing President Adams, and Madison said, "Yeah, no, sorry, not going to give you that job. I understand that President Adams made you the justice of the peace. I get it, but no, we don't want you to be the justice of the peace, so we're not going to give you the job." So Marbury said, "Well, I don't think you're going to say that. I think I'm going to get my job." So he went ahead and took his case to the court. And he said, "Hey, President Adams gave me this job. And now Secretary of State James Madison won't allow me to take my position. I want to become the justice of the peace. So can you please go ahead and make me the justice of the peace?" Well, John Marshall, the Supreme Court justice at the time, went ahead and said that the law that was that allowed the court to give Marbury the job, the Judiciary Act, I think it was 1746, the Judiciary Act was the law at the time that Marbury was banking on that gave the court the power to give him the job. John Marshall said, "Well, that law is unconstitutional." So we find that the Judiciary Act of 1746, I think it was, is not constitutional. And therefore, we cannot enforce the giving of the job to you. The court, interestingly, did say Marbury had a right to the job, but they just couldn't enforce the right because the law, the Judiciary Act, was found to be unconstitutional by John Marshall and the Supreme Court that he led, right? And so at that point, The Marbury versus Madison decision is the decision where the court gives itself the power to review the laws that are being enacted in the states and also to strike them down as inconsistent with the Constitution, right? And from then till now, Marbury versus Madison remains the law of the land. The United States Supreme Court retains the right of judicial review that it gave itself when they reviewed Marbury versus Madison and struck down the Judiciary Act, right? The Supreme Court can review federal laws, constitutional statutes, and the reason why there's never been a change to that case, Marbury versus Madison, the right of judicial review by the Supreme Court to strike stuff down. The reason why is a concept in the law we call stare decisis, right? Stare decisis means the decision stands. It's the idea that laws, in order to be effective and maintain society, we are a society of laws. You may have heard that expression, right? We are a society of laws, not of men. That means that laws are supposed to govern. No man is above the law. No person is above the law, right? In order for that to be the case, and for the citizens who are governed by laws to have faith in their government, the laws must be consistent and predictable. If you go changing the rules every couple of years, like they did when they struck down Roe versus Wade, if you go changing the rules every couple of years, the people who are supposed to be governed by those rules no longer believe that they are legitimate, because it's one thing one day and one thing another day, right? So the concept of stare decisis is that once the Supreme Court makes a rule, unless there is a real extraordinary reason, that rule needs to stand for a really, really long time, if not forever. Okay, so the concept of stare decisis and the rule of judicial review, the power of judicial review that the court gave itself in the case of Marbury versus Madison, that power is not in the Constitution. The court gave it to itself. John Marshall gave it to the court, and it has been that way ever since. So that's the connection. That's how the court goes ahead and balances the actions, the conduct of the legislative branch, Congress and the House of Representatives, and the executive branch, the president, right? By using the power of judicial review to review congressional action, to review congressional statutes, to review federal laws, to review state laws, and to compare them to the Constitution and to strike down the ones that do not stand up to constitutional analysis. Okay, so a quick point. Some of you wrote to me, 2 quick points. Some of you wrote to me about Miranda versus Arizona, right? Where, you get your Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent, blah, blah, blah. Okay. That was a state action. And the Supreme Court said that Miranda's conviction was unconstitutional because he did not knowingly waive his rights. He needed a lawyer to make sure that he understood what he was giving up. Even though Miranda was a bad dude. He was a criminal. He was a pretty bad dude, right? But it doesn't matter. That's the beauty of the law. The law doesn't care, right? Even if you're the worst dude ever, you could be a serial killer. If they violate your rights, in theory, you can't be convicted when your rights have been violated. So that's the beauty of the law. The law applies equally to everybody. And what you did doesn't justify how they go ahead and get the conviction. Got to play by the Constitution in order for a guilty finding to stand. So Miranda versus Arizona is another example of sort of judicial review of the court looking in on a state action, the way they looked in on Brown versus Board of Education, right? They looked in, they saw what Arizona did, and they said, nope, unconstitutional. Okay, got to go. And they changed the law as a result of the judicial review of Arizona's process. Laws across the country in different states changed so that police procedure would incorporate Your Miranda warnings. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, one will be appointed for you. Do you understand these rights? Okay. So that Miranda versus Arizona that some of you have written to me about is an example of judicial review and the power of the court to balance things, right? So I do want to stop for a minute and make sure that you understand the difference between judicial review and appellate process. Okay, different, totally different. So if you have a case, right? When I was traveling, we were supporting a trial. So you were with me in my crazy hotel room for 2 weeks, right? We were supporting an attempted murder trial. And there was a conviction in that case. The person who got convicted has the right to appeal the conviction up the appellate to the appellate court, to the circuit court, and to the United States Supreme Court if the Supreme Court will take his case. But the purpose of appellate review is to take, when the trial happens, I want you to picture a blank book. And the trial happens every day of the trial. Whatever happens is being written into the book. Okay? When the trial is over, if there's a conviction, whatever is in the book, only whatever is in the book, only the things that happened during the trial are able to be reviewed by the next court up. So decisions by the judge on a day-to-day basis, all day long, the judge is making rulings, right? Objection, overruled. Objection, sustained. I'd like to put this thing into evidence. No. All of those decisions are part of the book. And all of those decisions get reviewed for their propriety during the appellate review process. Okay? That's the difference. Appellate review takes a process that has been written into the four corners of a book and finished, sealed up. And the appellate review process goes over what happened in the pages of the book only, not something that didn't happen in court, not something that is newly discovered. No, the appellate process reviews what happened in the pages of the book, and the person who is the subject of the appeal, the person who got convicted, or the person against whom the court ruled in a civil action, has the right to go up the chain and have their case reviewed, have all the decisions that were made that led to the outcome reviewed by a higher court. That's different than the process of judicial review as given to the court by Marbury versus Madison. Judicial review is the court can look into something you are actively doing, like segregating your schools, like trying to use taxpayer money to zero out student loans, like not telling people they have the right to remain silent before you interrogate them. The court can look in on the thing you are actively doing as the president, as Congress, or as a state, and review what you're doing and tell you got to stop it. It's not constitutional. Okay? So that's the difference between appellate review and judicial review. Okay. So because it's Thanksgiving, we're not going to rattle on blah, blah, blah. I'm going to post this video, and you know that already. If you're watching it, you already found it. I'm going to post this video, and I'm also going to post a companion video from our friends at Harvard about the judicial branch and Congress and the interconnectivity between the two. But the main point is judicial review, Marbury, Madison. Okay. As always, I am out here to assist you, to help you, to make sure that you get through this class. We'll talk more when I see you live a week from tomorrow. I hope you enjoy your Thanksgiving leftovers. I hope you are grateful for the family around you. I am certainly grateful for the opportunity to be with you every week. It is my privilege. And I hope you have a big fat plate of food or a small snack and take a moment out of your lives to just think about how lucky we all are to be where we are with the people we are with. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone, and I will see you live a week from tomorrow. If you need me, email me. Don't forget to CC my Gmail and or text me and or call me. I am out here to assist you in every way that I know how. Okay, so guys, happy Thanksgiving to you, and I'll see you in a week.